The village lay quietly in a valley surrounded by green hills that rolled endlessly under the soft sun. The air smelled of earth and grass, and the sound of birds filled the mornings. People moved slowly along narrow dirt paths, greeting each other with warm smiles and familiar nods. In this village, everyone had a role and life followed a simple rhythm. There were bakers who rose before dawn to knead dough, blacksmiths who shaped metal in the glow of their furnaces, and farmers who tilled the soil from sunrise to sunset. Among these villagers lived Armin, a man whose life seemed ordinary at first glance but whose presence held a calm and quiet strength that few noticed. Armin's days were filled with the routine of farming. He woke early, often before the birds, and went out into the fields to inspect the crops. His hands were rough and strong from years of working with the soil, and his eyes, a deep shade of brown, held a softness that reflected the peace he had found in the simple life. People in the village knew him as reliable and kind. He helped neighbors without being asked, carried water for the elderly, and fixed broken tools for anyone who needed them. Children ran after him laughing, knowing he would always have a small gift or a joke ready to make them smile. To the villagers, he was a quiet man, someone who belonged to the land and nothing more. One morning, as Armin worked in his fields, Lena arrived in the village. She was a young traveler, carrying a notebook and a camera, eager to document the lives of people living far from the noise and rush of the cities. Lena had traveled for months, moving from village to village, learning their stories and capturing moments that revealed the beauty of everyday life. When she first saw Armin, she thought little of him. He was just another villager, bending over the soil, tending to his plants with careful hands. She assumed he was like the others, quiet, predictable, and limited to the small world of the fields. Lena spent several days observing the village, wandering along narrow paths, talking to elders, and taking notes on the routines she saw. Everywhere she looked, she saw simplicity and harmony. The villagers lived with a sense of trust and calm that fascinated her, but her eyes kept returning to Armin. He seemed different, though she could not yet say why. There was a steadiness in the way he moved, a calm confidence that suggested he understood the world in ways that went beyond farming. Yet, he said little about himself. He offered greetings and smiles, but never spoke of ambition, travel, or the life he might have led before choosing this quiet existence. Each morning, Lena watched Armin work in the fields. She saw how he cared for the earth, how he knew the right time to water the plants, and how he could predict the weather from the clouds and wind. Villagers would come to him for advice about crops and livestock, and he always gave answers with patience and humility. He never boasted, and he never seemed to expect thanks. This selflessness intrigued Lena, but she remained convinced that he was in the end just a farmer. Despite her initial judgment, there was something about Armin that pulled her attention. She noticed small details, the way his hands moved with precision, the way he observed the world around him with quiet awareness, and the way children instinctively trusted him. He could calm an anxious animal with a gentle touch and encourage a shy child with a kind word. There was a discipline in his actions, a sense of timing and control that Lena could not understand. She began to wonder if perhaps there was more to him than met the eye. One afternoon, Lena followed Armin to a nearby stream where he went to wash his hands after tending the fields. She watched him interact with the villagers along the way. When a goat wandered off into the tall grass, Armin calmly guided it back, speaking softly and moving with deliberate care. When a woman stumbled while carrying a basket of vegetables, he quickly steadied her and offered to carry the load part way. Every action he took seemed natural, almost effortless, but Lena sensed there was a hidden strength beneath his calm demeanor. She started to ask villagers about him, but most gave only simple answers. "He's always been like this," one elder said. "Quiet, helpful, strong, that's all we know." No one mentioned any past adventures or skills beyond farming. To Lena, the mystery of Armin grew. How could someone appear so ordinary, yet move through life with such quiet power? She decided to watch more closely, hoping for a moment that would reveal his true character. Days turned into a week, and Lena grew increasingly fascinated. She noticed that Armin never rushed. He never lost his temper, and he seemed prepared for every situation, no matter how small. If a tool broke, he fixed it immediately with precision. If a storm approached, he secured the animals in fields with careful planning. Even when accidents happened, he remained calm, solving problems with a patience that Lena found remarkable. Yet, he never spoke of himself. He never explained why he acted the way he did or where he had learned such careful skill. Lena began to see that Armin's quietness was not emptiness but strength. He did not need to impress anyone with words or actions because he understood the value of calm and steady action. He lived fully in the present, attentive to the world around him, and capable of responding to any challenge, however small. To Lena, it was like watching a hidden river flow beneath the surface of the land, unseen, yet powerful. By the end of her first week in the village, Lena realized that her initial impression had been wrong. She had believed he was just a farmer, simple and ordinary, but she could sense that there was something more, something hidden, something waiting for the right moment to appear. She did not yet know what that moment would be, but she felt a growing curiosity and admiration for the quiet man who lived in harmony with the land and its people, a man whose calm presence hinted at a strength that few could imagine. And so, Lena continued to observe, notebook in hand, capturing details of daily life, unaware that soon she would witness a side of Armin no one had seen for years, a side that would reveal courage, skill, and heroism in a way that would leave her and the entire village astonished. The peaceful rhythm of the village began to shift one afternoon. The sun was warm, and a gentle breeze moved across the fields, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Villagers were tending their crops, children were playing along the dirt paths, and birds sang without interruption. Everything seemed calm, just as it had for generations. Yet far beyond the hills, an unfamiliar sound began to stir, a sound that brought a subtle tension to the air. A group of strangers was moving toward the village. They were armed, rough-looking men whose expressions carried both purpose and danger. They were not like the villagers who lived quietly and with care. These men spoke loudly, laughed harshly, and carried tools and weapons that glinted in the sunlight. Villagers who saw them from a distance felt an immediate unease. Rumors spread quickly. These men were not here to trade or pass through. They were here to take, to scare, and perhaps to harm. Lena, walking near the edge of the village, noticed the change in the air. Birds fled from the trees, and an uneasy silence replaced the usual chatter of the village. She observed the villagers' reactions. Some ran to their homes, locking doors and pulling curtains. Others gathered in small groups, whispering anxiously, unsure what to do. Fear had entered their hearts, a fear they had never experienced before. Lena herself felt a mixture of worry and curiosity. She wanted to understand how this small, quiet community would face such a threat. Armin, however, seemed untroubled. He walked calmly through his fields, his eyes scanning the horizon. The breeze ruffled his hair, but his expression remained steady, almost serene. Villagers noticed him, and in their panic, found a strange comfort in his calm presence. While others ran, he stayed, moving deliberately as if he already knew what needed to be done. He began preparing the village in subtle, quiet ways. Using nothing more than simple tools and his deep knowledge of the land, Armin checked gates, secured livestock, and moved supplies to safer areas. He guided children to hidden corners where they could be safe and spoke gently to frightened villagers, giving instructions without causing alarm. His voice was calm and confident, the kind of voice that told people everything would be all right. Lena watched him closely, amazed at how different he seemed from the ordinary farmer she had believed him to be. Every action he took was precise and purposeful. When a heavy branch had fallen across a path, he lifted it with ease, clearing the way for the villagers. When a wheelbarrow tipped over, he righted it without a word, keeping the movement of the village steady. His presence alone seemed to ease the growing tension. At that moment, Lena began to understand something she had suspected but never confirmed. Armin was not just a simple farmer. There was a quiet strength in him that went beyond muscles or skill. It was a strength of mind, of planning, and of courage. He moved like someone who had faced danger before, someone who understood fear but refused to be controlled by it. Yet he did not reveal this side of himself to anyone. He did not boast, and he did not act for praise. He acted because it was necessary, and because he cared for the people around him. The group of strangers approached the village slowly but with confidence. They were used to intimidation, and they had never encountered villagers who resisted them. They shouted and waved their weapons, expecting fear to scatter the community. But Armin met them with calm determination. He positioned himself near the main path into the village, not aggressively but strategically. He did not carry a heavy weapon, only a simple blade he had kept for emergencies, yet his posture suggested readiness. The strangers laughed at him at first, thinking a single farmer could pose no threat. Lena felt a chill run down her spine as she watched him. There was something in his eyes, a quiet focus, that warned the intruders they had misjudged him. For the first time, Lena realized that appearances could be deceiving. The man she had believed to be ordinary was anything but. Armin had a plan. Using his knowledge of the terrain, he created simple but effective barriers, guided villagers to safe positions, and prepared the fields to slow down the intruders if necessary. He used farming tools, ropes, and even hidden ditches, turning everyday objects into potential protection. He worked with care, not haste, showing skill that could only come from experience and foresight. Lena marveled at his ability to transform the ordinary surroundings into a defensive advantage. As the strangers drew closer, their laughter faded into confusion. They had expected villagers to scatter, not to see careful preparations, not to find obstacles that seemed too intentional to be accidental. Armin moved among the villagers, guiding them with soft words and gestures, giving courage where fear threatened to take over. He instructed them to stay low, to help one another, and to be ready to follow his lead. Every movement was calculated, every word measured, revealing a depth of thought that Lena could not have imagined. Despite the growing tension, Armin remained calm. He never showed anger, and he never panicked. His presence alone was a reminder that the villagers were not powerless. Lena felt admiration growing within her. She realized that heroism was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and methodical. Sometimes it was about keeping a community safe with steady hands and a clear mind. As the first of the strangers stepped into the open area of the village, Armin's calmness did not waver. He waited, observing their movements, calculating their intentions. Lena noticed the way he shifted his weight, the subtle movements of his hands, and the way his eyes never left the approaching danger. She could sense that the farmer she had underestimated was preparing for something far beyond what anyone else in the village had imagined. For Lena, the day had already revealed a truth she could not ignore. The quiet man who worked in the fields, who smiled gently at children, and who spoke little about himself, was capable of more than anyone had realized. He was a protector, a strategist, and a force that could turn fear into hope. And although the confrontation had not yet begun, Lena felt certain that the coming hours would reveal a side of Armin that would leave the entire village astonished. The sun was dipping lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the village as the first of the intruders stepped into the open area near the main square. Their boots scuffed the dirt paths, and their eyes scanned the surroundings with expectation, looking for weakness. They laughed at the simplicity of the village, confident that fear would make the people scatter. But Armin remained calm, standing near the path as if he had always been meant to be there. His posture was steady, his hands lightly resting on the simple blade he carried. There was no panic in his eyes, only quiet focus. Lena, hiding behind a stack of firewood, watched in awe. She had expected the villagers to hide and hoped for their safety, but she could sense that Armin was not planning to flee. He was preparing for a confrontation that would test every skill he had ever learned. She had seen him work with crops and animals, help neighbors, and solve small problems, but now he revealed a strength that had been hidden all along. The intruders moved closer, shouting and brandishing their weapons, trying to provoke a reaction. Their confidence was palpable, and for a moment the village seemed like it might break under their presence. But Armand remained calm. He watched their movements carefully, reading their intentions and adjusting his stance. Every step he took was deliberate, and every glance was measured. Lena realized that he was not only prepared physically but mentally. He had the patience to wait for the right moment to act, and the wisdom to use his surroundings to his advantage. When the first intruder lunged toward the village gate, Armand moved with incredible speed. He intercepted the man's strike not with brute force but with precision. The blade he held met the intruder's weapon, deflecting it with a controlled motion that sent the attacker stumbling back. The movement was fluid, almost like a dance, yet full of power. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen such skill in anyone she thought was an ordinary farmer. The other intruders hesitated, surprised by the force and confidence of the man in front of them. They had expected fear, hesitation, or surrender. Instead, they faced someone who moved with calm authority, someone who could turn their own aggression against them without panic. Armand did not strike recklessly. Each move he made was calculated, to disarm, to protect, and to control the flow of the confrontation. Villagers who had hidden behind walls and carts began to peek out. Some whispered to each other, astonished at what they saw. The man they had known as gentle and quiet, the one who worked tirelessly in the fields, was now defending them with skill they had never imagined. He was not a man to fear violence, but a man to respect and follow. Lena felt a surge of admiration. The quiet strength she had sensed in him was now undeniable. Armand's movements were precise. He sidestepped attacks, parried with exact timing, and used the intruder's own energy against them. When one man tried to strike from behind, Armand twisted and redirected him, sending him off balance without harming anyone else. Every action seemed effortless, but Lena knew it required immense skill and control. She realized that he had trained for years, learning how to move, how to anticipate, and how to respond to danger. This was not luck or instinct. It was mastery. The intruders began to lose confidence. Their boldness wavered as they realized that the man in front of them was not just defending himself. He was defending the village, the people, and their way of life. Each failed attack made them more cautious, and each misstep revealed their inexperience compared to Armand's practiced skill. Lena noticed how he used the environment, guiding attackers toward obstacles he had prepared earlier, turning ordinary paths and tools into advantages. A pile of firewood became a barrier. A narrow path slowed their approach, and every corner was carefully considered. Even in the chaos, Armand maintained a calm presence. He spoke quietly to the villagers, reminding them to stay safe, to help one another, and to remain steady. His words were not shouted commands but gentle guidance filled with authority and care. He inspired confidence without raising his voice, showing that leadership was not about dominance but about protection and wisdom. Lena felt her respect deepen with every passing moment. The first clash ended quickly but decisively. Armand disarmed one intruder who dropped his weapon and fled in confusion. Another attacker fell into a shallow ditch Armand had prepared, tripping and struggling to regain balance while Armand stood ready, calm and unyielding. The remaining intruders began to retreat, their confidence shattered by the unexpected skill and strategy of the man they had thought would be easy to intimidate. For a moment, the village held its breath. The air was thick with tension, but slowly, relief began to spread. Children peeked from behind carts and villagers stepped out of hiding, seeing that Armand had successfully defended them. He did not celebrate or boast. Instead, he moved among the people, checking on everyone, making sure no one was hurt, and quietly assessing what might come next. Lena observed him, realizing that his true strength was not just in his skill with the blade, but in his ability to protect, to lead, and to think clearly under pressure. The intruders were gone for now, but the village remained alert. Armand guided them through the aftermath, organizing safe places for the children, checking that animals were unharmed, and ensuring that every villager understood how to respond if danger returned. Lena, who had only intended to observe, now found herself helping. She followed Armand's instructions, assisting wherever she could, and witnessed how his calm confidence transformed fear into courage. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the village gathered quietly. They had faced danger and survived, thanks to the man they had once believed was just a simple farmer. Lena approached Armin, her notebook forgotten for the moment, wanting to understand more about the person who had amazed her so completely. But Armin, as always, remained humble. He spoke of nothing extraordinary, of no past victories, only of the importance of staying calm, helping others, and being ready when challenges appeared. Lena realized that the events of the day had revealed a truth she could no longer ignore. The quiet, gentle man she had underestimated was capable of extraordinary courage and skill. He had protected the village without seeking recognition, had turned fear into safety, and had shown that true strength was often quiet, patient, and deeply rooted in character. She understood now that appearances could be deceiving, and that heroism could hide behind the simplest of exteriors. As night fell, the village began to settle. Children were guided to their homes, animals secured, and doors carefully closed. Armin remained vigilant, patrolling the area with quiet watchfulness, ready for whatever might come next. Lena watched him from a distance, her admiration growing with every measured step he took. She knew she had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would stay with her forever. The day a man who seemed ordinary revealed himself to be the protector of an entire village, calm and strong, skillful and brave, a hero in plain sight. The village had survived the first encounter, but the tension did not fade. Armin moved through the streets, alert and focused, making sure that every family was safe and that every path was secure. He spoke quietly with the villagers, guiding them on how to react if the intruders returned. Even simple instructions, where to hide, which paths were safest, how to move without drawing attention, were delivered with confidence, and people listened because his calm presence gave them strength. Lena followed him from a distance, amazed at how naturally he took control without ever seeming to demand it. She realized that true leadership was not loud or forceful. It was measured, steady, and filled with care. Armin taught the villagers to use the tools they had at hand for defense, showing them how ordinary objects could be used strategically. Wooden poles, farming knives, and even baskets of grain could serve as barriers or distractions. It was not about fighting for the sake of violence. It was about protecting lives, and Armin made that clear in every word and gesture. Children, who had been frightened earlier, began to look to him with trust rather than fear. He guided them to safer spots, showed them simple ways to stay calm, and reminded them to follow their parents. Villagers whispered among themselves, amazed at the transformation of a man they had always seen as quiet and ordinary. Armin had revealed a courage and wisdom that went beyond mere skill with a blade. He inspired confidence, courage, and unity. As the day wore on, Armin observed the surrounding hills and paths. He noted where danger might appear and where the village could be vulnerable. Using his knowledge of the terrain, he created hidden traps and signs to warn villagers of approaching threats. His planning was meticulous, yet it seemed effortless, as if protecting the community had always been his responsibility. Lena watched him place small obstacles and guide the villagers in subtle ways, understanding for the first time how deeply he thought about safety and strategy. The sun began to dip behind the distant hills, and the shadows grew longer across the fields. Armin continued to patrol, moving quietly yet purposefully. He checked the livestock, made sure water supplies were safe, and ensured that every corner of the village had been considered. He spoke to individuals who seemed frightened, calming them with simple words and reassurances. He did not ask for recognition, nor did he boast about what he had done. His focus was entirely on the safety and well-being of others. Lena, following closely, realized that this was the true measure of Armin's strength. It was not only in his skill with the blade, but in his ability to remain calm under pressure, think ahead, and help others find courage within themselves. Every villager who followed his instructions gained confidence, and the village began to feel a sense of unity it had never experienced before. Fear was replaced by cautious hope, all because of the quiet man they had underestimated. As night fell, Armin stood at the edge of the village, looking out toward the hills. The wind carried sounds from far away, and he listened carefully, his mind calculated possibilities, ready for anything that might come. Lena noticed how his posture never wavered, how his eyes scanned every shadow, and how his movements were controlled and deliberate. She understood that he was not merely reacting to danger, he was preparing for it, staying one step ahead to protect everyone under his care. Hours passed, and the village remained safe. Children slept with a sense of security, families huddled, together without fear, and the villagers began to see Armin not just as a farmer but as a protector. Lena approached him, notebook in hand, wanting to ask about his past, his training, and how he had learned to be so capable. Armin smiled softly, speaking only about the importance of remaining calm, staying aware and helping others. He did not dwell on his own abilities, only on what could be done to keep everyone safe. Lena realized that the story she had come to capture was far deeper than she had imagined. It was not simply about a man defending a village. It was about courage, humility, and the quiet power of someone who chose to protect others without seeking recognition. She understood that true heroism often hides in plain sight, and that the most ordinary-looking people could hold extraordinary strength within them. The night was quiet, but Armin remained vigilant. The village slept, unaware of how close danger had come, and how one man's calm courage had shielded them all. Lena knew she had witnessed something unforgettable. She understood that when people underestimated someone, they often missed the hidden depth of character, the quiet determination, and the courage that could emerge when needed most. The next morning, the village awoke to the sunlight glinting on the fields. The intruders had not returned, and life began to resume its usual rhythm. But there was a new sense of awareness among the villagers. They moved carefully, helping one another and staying alert, guided by the lessons Armin had taught them. Lena noticed the subtle changes in the community. Confidence replaced fear, and trust in one another strengthened. Armin returned to his fields, tending crops and caring for animals, blending once again into the life he had always lived. But he was no longer just the quiet farmer the villagers had known. He was their protector, a man who had revealed extraordinary skill and courage when it mattered most. He moved with humility, never speaking of the battles he had faced, never boasting of his abilities, yet every villager knew they owed their safety to him. Lena approached him, finally gathering the courage to ask about his past. He spoke softly, of training he had received long ago, skills he had learned and then left behind to live a life of peace. He had chosen the simple life, believing that strength should serve others quietly, not seek attention. His words were modest, but Lena saw the depth behind them. A life shaped by discipline, courage, and a commitment to protecting others without desire for reward. The villagers celebrated quietly, offering thanks in their own humble ways. But Armin remained focused on his daily work. He guided children to school, tended the fields, and helped with repairs around the village, always attentive and careful. Lena realized that heroism could exist without fanfare, that courage could be quiet and patient, and that one person's choices could protect an entire community. By the end of the day, Lena had captured more than just a story of defense. She had witnessed the power of calm courage, humility, and dedication. Armin had shown that true strength was not in the size of one's weapon or the noise of one's actions, but in the ability to remain steady, protect others, and act wisely under pressure. As she prepared to leave the village, Lena knew that she would never forget this man. He had shown her that appearances could deceive, that ordinary lives could hide extraordinary abilities, and that one person's courage could inspire an entire community. Armin returned to his fields quiet and humble, yet the village would remember him forever, not as just a farmer, but as the protector who had seized the moment when it mattered most. And as the sun set over the hills, Lena understood that the story of Armin was not simply about a single day of danger. It was about the quiet power of those who choose to protect, the courage that emerges in unexpected ways, and the extraordinary strength that can exist in even the most ordinary-looking person. She smiled, knowing she had witnessed a true hero, one who needed no praise, only the safety and well-being of those around him.